it was very natural, very quick and early progression. I came of age musically playing in garage bands, and at a certain point, my rock and roll buddies and I became a little bored with just covering the three Bs, right? Beatles, Birds, and Beach Boys. And we started trying our hand at writing our own songs. They were probably pretty terrible, but it was fun. We realized, hey, we can do this. And I was a big fan of Francis Vincent Zappa, Frank Zappa. And at the bottom, somewhere always in the bottom of the liner notes, buried in the fine print of Frank's early albums, was this defiant little quote: "The present day composer refuses to die." Edgar Varese. And my rock and roll buddies and I would scratch our heads and, who is this Varese guy? And one day, my pal Richard Einhorn, who's also a composer to this day, found the answer to that question in the form of an LP, which he found in a shop in Greenwich Village. The Music of Edgar Varese, Volume 2. This guy with the big shock of gray hair and the mad scientist eyebrows, and we took it and we put it on, and we thought, what is this noise? And we couldn't get enough of it, and we wore the grooves out. And Varese led to Cage, led to Feldman, led to Pauline Oliveras, and suddenly this whole new world of music opened up to us. And it didn't take long before the conventions, the constrictions of the pop song form, the 4/4 meter, the relentless backbeat, the three chords, and the 4-bar phrases, just felt a little bit stale. And I started doing electronic music and writing pieces for prepared piano, and before you knew it, this is what I thought I wanted to do with my life. I think there is an Americanness to it, but it's not so much. Again, it's not the sound; it's the attitude. It's both the curse and the salvation of potential salvation of American culture. Right? Is that we don't care how anybody else did it or where it came from. We imagine that we can do it ourselves. So I think, in some ways, my life in Alaska was acting out on that belief system, or that attitude, putting it into a rather extreme practice. Because in Alaska, I imagined that I might discover a new kind of music that didn't come from culture, but somehow came directly from the earth and the air and the water and the ice and the fire of that place. To pull the music directly from the elements of the world itself. It's a patently ridiculous notion that somehow you can step outside of culture, and yet it's served me very well, lo these going on 50 years. And really, it's no more. Of course, we're all inevitably products of culture, of our cultures, whatever that may be these days, and of human culture. But an equally ridiculous idea is that somehow human culture stands apart from nature. That's an absurd proposition that's gotten us into some very, very serious, potentially terminal trouble as a species. So, as my friend Barry Lopez, the writer, says, landscape is the culture that contains all human cultures. So I've tried to I've rooted my life's work there, And maybe that's a very American thing. It's certainly a very Alaskan idea that, you roll up your sleeves, you get the duct tape, and you do it yourself. I shudder to think what might have become of me, not only artistically, but personally, had I not found Alaska. I grew up all over the eastern seaboard in equally homogeneous suburban surroundings, from Georgia to suburban New York City. And truly, other than some differences in the plants, the suburb in New Jersey could have been the suburb in South Carolina or wherever. So when people would talk about going home, I honestly didn't know what they meant, because there was no place that I identified with as home. There was no place to which I felt that ultimately I belonged. And this was a deep, inarticulate hunger that finally came to a head during my years in music school at Cal Arts in Los Angeles. And again, I wouldn't trade those years, my experiences in Southern California, for anything. I'm still working with musical gifts that I was given then and there. But I couldn't wait to get out of there. There was a kind of existential hole in my stomach that I felt the whole time I was there. And I think that is ultimately what made a composer out of me. It's what made an environmentalist out of me. And it's what led me to Alaska, where I found the place to which I truly belong. Yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. I'm a sensualist and I'm a formalist. I never understood why music couldn't have it all, why music couldn't be kind of intellectually elegant and airtight, but at the same time just kind of ravishingly beautiful and sensuously overwhelming. So I'm fascinated by music, by a whole musical composition that is one sound. And this large orchestra, actually deployed as 3 different ensembles, I think of as one huge living, breathing organism that rises and falls in different ways. And the formal structure of the piece is really quite simple. It's just waves. It's waves in very simple prime number relationships, 3, 5, and 7. So you have the slow layer that's moving, rising and falling in pitch and in dynamics at the rate of 3. And then you have the next layer that's moving at 5, and you have the next that's moving faster at 7. And of course, what happens then? It's like it's a little bit like waves and the tides in the ocean. Things ebb and flow and rise and fall and pass and interfere with one another. But there are these moments when all 3 of the layers come together in these huge tsunamis of sound, and that happens 3 times in the piece. And then, of course, the opposite is true. There are these 2 beautiful moments when all the layers go down to a whisper, to almost nothing. Those are my favorite moments in the piece, when it almost disappears before blooming again. The whole formal structure of the piece is a palindrome, so that the second half of Become Ocean is the first half backwards, just like a wave. So the whole piece is like one huge wave. But, we've all had this experience of floating down a river or driving down a highway or going up a mountain and down a mountain. And even though you're retracing your steps or you're going over the same hill, it's a completely different experience. So that when you come back in the last part of the piece, there's the last third of Become Ocean. There's this moment in the brass, in the low brass. It's very dark, and when you're in the first half of the piece, it's beautiful, it's rich, it's mysterious. At the end of the piece, when that particular wave returns, it has this kind of almost tragic quality to it. It has this depth that you didn't realize before because you hadn't made the journey yet.